Hello, my name is Aaron Kelly. I'm coordinator of the Irish chapter of the Network in Defence of Humanity. And today and all days, I call for the immediate end to the illegal criminal blockade of Cuba by the USA. Under every set of terms established by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this blockade is a violation of human rights. Let me quote the US State Department right at the very start of these long 60 years of suffering that has been imposed upon the Cuban people, from the US State Department itself. The blockade is, and I quote, to bring about hunger. To bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of government. That's the words of Lester Mallory 60 years ago. Anybody on this island of Ireland who cares about the historical experience that Ireland endured at the hands of an empire which used starvation as a weapon of war against the Irish people, with cataclysmic consequences during An Gorta Mór, the Great Famine. Anybody who stays true to the radical tradition politically in Ireland that fought against that kind of imperialism must fight today against any form of imperialism, regardless of which butcher's flag it is governed by. Cuban revolutionaries are taught, educated in humanitarianism. They feel, in the words of Fidel Castro, that they have a debt to humanity. In Ireland, we have a debt to humanity just as surely. And if this island has distinguished itself in many ways in anti-imperialist struggle, it has of course got a much more reactionary and conservative side to it too. It is important that we assert that radical anti-imperialist tradition on this island and beyond. The blockade and its effects are utterly dire just now. Cubans, despite being denied basic foodstuffs, basic toiletries, the basic necessities of life, and this has been going on for 60 years, despite all of this, they will still go where they are needed around the world as medics and doctors. Currently, during COVID, they were there in the front line when it was Ebola, when it's natural disasters. Go and ask people in Africa, people post-earthquakes in Pakistan and so on, and they will tell you that it's Cubans who are the great humanitarians on this planet, who have led the way, and yet they are being subjected to a criminal, genocidal blockade. And if you think that the term genocidal is overwrought, then look at international law, look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the working definition of genocide there. Using hunger and starvation as a weapon of war to overthrow Cuba is genocidal. We owe it to those Cubans who will go anywhere around the world to help, as medics and doctors who have gone there as competents in Southern Africa. Ask people in Southern Africa, in Angola, Namibia, South Africa itself, who Cubans are when it comes to humanity, humanitarianism and democracy, because they were on the cutting edge of the fight for all of those things in Southern Africa and beyond. This is particularly a message to those who would delude themselves that by being complicit in this blockade, they're doing something right or something good. Let us be clear. Cuba is not being punished for its failures. It's being punished for its successes. You may find then two sets of lies that are used to defend support for this illegal criminal blockade. The first of which are a set of lies about Cuba itself, that it's a dictatorship and it's a repressive regime. Cuba is a democracy. It's a radically different kind of democracy than the one to which people are accustomed in the West. It's participatory and it's built from the ground up. From the ground up. When people vote in Cuba and they find themselves with the equivalent of an MP, MPs, Choctaw Doila, local representatives, and that representative isn't doing what they were meant to do, then every year you can vote them out. And that's what Cuban people do. The Cuban Constitution is written by its people. The last renewal of the Constitution, which is a vast collection of the views of the Cuban people, unlike, say, a census in this country, which is basically turning people into sort of abstract data. Every Cuban gets a say in their constitution. 90% of the population voted to endorse the renewed constitution. What I would say to people in Western societies is, imagine that. Imagine being able to write, to be the co-author, the co-signatory of your country's constitution. Because that is not something that happens in so-called democracies and so on. The other set of lies that allows people the kind of cognitive dissonance or disconnect to support this illegality is that they tend to think of themselves as bearers of some sort of abstract liberal democracy, which doesn't even exist in their own countries, let alone anywhere else. People in alienated, class-ridden Western societies should learn from Cuba rather than punish its example. And this fantasy, abstract version of liberal democracy most certainly doesn't exist in the USA, in Ireland, or Britain, or France, or anywhere else. It just about exists in the pages of The Guardian and newspapers like that. But it most certainly does not exist when US imperialism imposes itself on small nations in the global south, in the Caribbean, the Americas. And the point of reference, should the US ever get its way in Cuba, is not some abstract ideal of liberal democracy. The point of reference is what's going on right now in places like Haiti. That's the point of reference. Whether you agree or disagree with Cuba's version of participatory grassroots democracy, whether you agree or disagree with their constitution, that is of no matter. All of those are the sovereign concerns of the Cuban people, who have freely and democratically expressed their support for the way they do things and for their great humanitarian constitution. Everyone in Ireland must support the sovereignty of the Cuban people. We must urgently ensure that this murderous blockade is ended once and for all. We must also ensure that the partition of Cuba is ended. Let us register that Cuba is effectively partitioned today because part of it is illegally occupied by the US in land upon which it also operates the torture camp in Guantanamo Bay. So enough complicity in 60 years of this imperialism. If in Ireland you feel that you are a decolonizer, an anti-imperialist, but that is only in relation to the British Empire, and you fully support what the US is about, and you want to bring symbolically bowls of shamrock to US presidents and to greet them, divest yourself of the illusion that you're an anti-imperialist. You are an imperialist. The butcher's apron that you supplicate yourself before has changed shape, hasn't changed colours. But you're an imperialist nonetheless. To stay loyal, to stay true to that great radical tradition in Ireland, all forms of imperialism must be opposed. Today, urgently, the Cuban people need us to stand up and to be part of an international struggle to end the genocidal, criminal, murderous blockade of Cuba. Viva Cuba! Viva la Revolución Cubana!